With President Trump threatening to use the Insurrection Act in Minnesota, I'm joined now to discuss this with Republican Congressman from Pennsylvania, Scott Perry. Congressman Perry, thank you so much for joining us here today. The president says that professional agitators and others are attacking ICE agents who are just carrying out the law. How are these protests crossing the line from protected free speech? And would you support Trump invoking the Insurrection Act at this point?
Well, I will tell you that every single lawmaker, doesn't matter left, right, center, anywhere along the spectrum, supports the First Amendment right to free speech, to protest, and to seek redress from your government. However, that does not include impeding traffic or obstructing justice by putting yourself in between law enforcement and the criminals that they're trying to apprehend or conduct law enforcement activities upon. That does not include that. And so if they want to characterize protest as impeding law enforcement, of course, that's not the same thing. We all support protesting, but it must be done peacefully, and you can't be disturbing the peace or obstructing justice. And if that is the case, then people that are engaged in those activities need to be arrested and tried for those infractions of the law.
And we're seeing these protests turn increasingly violent, with protesters chucking rocks at officers. Do you think that it's gotten to the point where the Insurrection Act needs to be invoked?
Well, I certainly think that the president is going to have to consider that. Understand, these are states and leaders of states that refuse to aid and assist in federal law enforcement, literally telling their local and state law enforcement to not assist, allowing this kind of activity, which, let's face it, if they're throwing rocks, frozen bottles, whatever else at law enforcement officers just because they work for the federal government as opposed to your local county or township or your state police, it doesn't mean that's not an assault on law enforcement. It doesn't mean that that's not an obstruction of justice. And the president is going to have to do what is necessary to make sure that the streets are calmed and that the streets are made safe again, since the governors and some of these elected officials, whether they be mayors or representatives at the state level, refuse to assist in that and actually are stoking the flames of violence and violent, what we would call probably violent protest.
I want to pivot now to another topic here on foreign affairs, Iran's protests. Now, this is the 19th day amid an internet blackout and mass arrests, mass killings. You've described the government as illegitimate. What might the U.S. do in assisting regime change, but does so that it doesn't end up like Iraq?
Well, I think that the first thing we can do, of course, is let the people that are peacefully protesting the destruction of their country by this illegitimate government, we can say that we stand beside them and encourage them and encourage the rest of the world to continue to isolate their government. They are protesting because of the mismanagement of their government, the destruction of their currency, and things like the lack of electricity for most hours of the day. It's no way to live in the 21st century. And we can stand by them, certainly morally, and then, of course, diplomatically as well. But I think the biggest thing we can do is continue the economic pressure on this terrorist regime to force them to leave office. Now, they can either do that peacefully or otherwise, but we need to leave it up to the citizens of Iran, formerly Persia, and we need to be there, assuming that regime does come down, to be able to assist them in joining the rest of the Western civilized world in a reasonable and safe fashion, where they will need help to stop the other terrorists and other terrorist nations or enemies of the United States from sweeping in and assuming some kind of authority. The United States is going to have to be there for that. But that doesn't mean we need to put soldiers on the ground or conduct kinetic activities in Iran.
And the U.S. is withdrawing some personnel from the Middle Eastern bases. Does this signal anything, or is it just a precaution, do you think?
Well, I think it's certainly a precaution, and I would just say this regarding any adversary or enemy. which Iran clearly is one. Remember, they chant death to America. They say it's not a slogan, but it's their policy. You got to take them at their word. But the element of surprise is certainly important, and not having telegraphed your actions is critical to success in any kind of operation, whether it's diplomatic, military, economic, or otherwise. So I think it's a precautionary measure, again, to keep Iran on its heels and guessing what might happen next. But I think it's important that this regime in Iran, after all these decades of oppressive years, is taken out by the Iranian people.
And Congressman Perry, the last thing I want to ask you about are Greenland. Leaders from Denmark and Greenland say that a fundamental disagreement persists with the U.S. following a meeting at the White House. Why is it such a vital strategic location for the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly a huge landmass on the back door of the United States of America, of course, just across the Arctic from Russia. And I just must say that the new weapons technology and technology in general puts places like Russia and China closer to the United States, maybe not geographically, but certainly within a time span which is ever compressing. And unfortunately, the tiny country of Denmark, a fraction of the size of the landmass of Greenland, cannot protect Greenland from China or Russia. And unfortunately, that's going to fall to the United States of America. China and Russia are not going to seek to set up outposts and operations, military or otherwise, on Greenland to influence, some Denmark or Western Europe. They're going to do it to influence the United States of America, potentially in a military fashion. And the United States of America simply can't afford to have another Cuba-like situation on our doorstep.
Congressman Scott Perry, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate your perspective.